We're fearlessly talking about the biggest stories that matter to you the most. Breaking news, John Calipari is finalizing a 5-year deal to become the Arkansas Razorbacks' next head coach, covering college sports like no one else. The biggest guests in sports. We now welcome in Hall of Famer Jim Calhoun.
Such a pride I had, I came to Connecticut.
The legend, Tim Tebow, joins us.
We'll run it back. I like it.
The legend, Herschel Walker. Welcome in, everybody. The rare Wednesday morning edition, Aaron Torres Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Torres. Hope everybody's doing well. Hope everybody's having a great day. When I tell you we got ourselves a loaded midweek show, feels like we're coming off the first great Tuesday, Wednesday night of college hoops. And so we're going to dive in because there is so much to discuss out of Tuesday night. We're going to start Arkansas, 0-4 in the SEC, another loss in league play. What do we even make of it? What do we make of Cal? We got to go ahead and discuss that. From there, speaking of disappointing, speaking of programs with a lot of money to spend that aren't living up to expectations, the Indiana Hoosiers. Worst home loss in program history. They're booing Mike Woodson. By the way, it's my nickname for him. That's not what I'm calling him. Is Mike Woodson. Is the regime over? From there, we'll get to some other odds and ends from the evening. Florida upset by Missouri. Ole Miss upsets Bama. Auburn looks awesome. Arizona looks awesome. And I'll say this. Buzz Williams says Kentucky's good enough to win a national championship after Kentucky picks up another top 15 win at home. So we will discuss that game as well. Before we get started, a couple quick things. One, as always, make sure that you're subscribed to the Aaron Torres Pod YouTube channel. We are this close to 49,000 subscribers, which means we are this close to 50,000 subscribers. And I'll tell you what, once we get to 50K, we got to have some sort of party, some sort of celebration, because we are so close. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube, but also Apple, Spotify. I know many of you do like to still listen on podcast. I listen to most of my audio on podcast as well. So make sure you're subscribed on Apple, Spotify, and do me a quick favor, leave a 5-star rating and review. Also, before we get started, I mentioned this the other day, something that's very important to me. So listen, I think a lot of you know, I do live in Southern California. I do live in the Los Angeles area, from Connecticut originally, but I currently live in Pasadena. It's been a crazy couple days, couple weeks in this area. And let me start by saying this. I'm not looking for any sympathy. I am fine. My family's fine. My in-laws are fine. But not far from where I live, there is actually quite a bit of devastation. And when I say not far, I mean a couple miles. I mean a 2-minute car ride. Then I bring it up because it's not only families and people that are impacted, but animals as well. On Monday of this week, I spent some time at the Pasadena Humane Society, and I basically went down there and said, what can I do to help? Good news is they have a lot of volunteers. They have a lot of stuff coming in, but at the same time, they do need help. They do need resources. They do need financial resources. And the Aaron Torres Pod and Aaron Torres Media, we are working with the Pasadena Humane Society to raise money for the Humane Society. I went ahead and started a GoFundMe just a few days ago. We're already at about $1,000. So if you could, listen, bottom line is this, let me just even backtrack. Here's the truth. Every dollar helps. Every dollar matters. And these are animals that did nothing wrong, that are displaced, that need food, but also need medical attention in this time of need. So Pasadena Humane Society is working with us, AT Media, Aaron Torres Media, and we're just trying to get as much money as we can. Couple things here before we get to the main show. Just worth noting, 100% of your donations go to the Humane Society. By the way, I should mention there's a link in the YouTube live chat. There is also a link that is going to be in the show description once this show goes live on both YouTube and podcast form. So there's a link there. You can donate there. But the bottom line is, just please understand that any donation helps. I understand money's tight. I understand that this isn't an easy time for anybody, and I'm not trying to imply that it is. So all I would ask is, if you have any money, if you have a couple bucks, it really does go a long way. Really does go to animals in need. Again, the link is on my Twitter feed. It's on my Instagram. It's also going to be available in the show description. So thank you to all of you for your support. We're just trying to raise as much money as we can. Thank you for your interest. Thank you for your support of the Aaron Torres Pod. With that said, let's get back to sports. This is supposed to be a fun show. So with that said, there is no more time to waste. So let's go ahead and get to the topic of the day. And the topic of the day, listen, I hate to say it. I said it on Sunday. Arkansas basketball, and maybe more specifically, John Calipari. I'm going to go ahead and, until further notice, call them the dark cloud, the rain cloud of college basketball. Because at the end of the day, it just feels like every time you talk about them, it's in a negative light. It's in a negative manner. I'm not a negative person by nature, but it's even dragging me down as somebody who covers it on a night in, night out basis. Okay. And so I bring it up because we talked about them to end Sunday's show. And I basically said, look, I know it's not pretty right now, but we put up the stat about they only had a 10% chance to get an at-large bid to the NCAA tournament. And I said, let's pump the brakes here. I said, you look at them, one great win against Michigan, that's it. But no bad losses, no quad 2, quad 3, quad 4 losses. Those are the worst kind of losses you can have on an NCAA tournament resume. And I just said, it's too early to freak out. Beat LSU, regroup, you're going to be fine. LSU was the next game on the schedule. LSU was also 0-3 in league play. LSU transparently is a less talented roster than Arkansas. And I said, just beat LSU, you're going to be fine. Well, I bring it up because Tuesday night in Baton Rouge, that game was played, Arkansas LSU. It was not pretty, and it was not pretty, especially if you were an Arkansas Razorbacks fan. Final score in this game, 78-74. LSU wins. Arkansas now falls to 0-4 in SEC play. They are alone in last place in the SEC. Boy, oh boy, oh boy. It is not good. Now, let's go ahead and get into the game. One thing I do want to say, because there was one play that to me really kind of signified like just it wasn't, let me put it this way. I don't think it was the best night for SEC officials, but there was one play that just signified things are going not in the right direction right now, okay? So Arkansas trails 53-52. I think there's about 8-9 minutes to go. Trevin Brazil gets called for a moving screen. Now, I do think it was a foul call. I don't think you can deny it was a foul. He kind of pushed off, whatever. Matt McMahon, the LSU coach, immediately goes to the ref. He waves his finger, which insinuates, hey, you should go to the monitor and check that for a flagrant foul. Okay, we cannot show you the video on YouTube. I apologize. There's copyright rules, all that good stuff. But the point I'm trying to make is it was probably a questionable foul at best, probably was a foul, but it wasn't like a super obvious can't miss foul. But there was no doubt when you watch this thing live, like, oh, that's not a flagrant. Like, okay, well, it'll be a 2-second monitor trip. We'll come back. Well, whatever. Well, I bring it up because they go to the monitor and they wait and they wait and they wait some more. And guess what ends up happening? They call a flagrant. It ends up being a 5-point possession for LSU. And that was just the metaphor for the game and maybe so far SEC play for Arkansas. Arkansas was down by 1 point when that call was made. It was an egregious, awful, flagrant foul call. And when they got the ball back, they were down by 6. They end up losing by 4. And I'm not saying that is the reason that Arkansas lost, but I will say that was an abominable call. It was an embarrassing call. And like I said, it was just a metaphor for the season. Now, to be clear, there's a difference between reasons and excuses. This is not an excuse. That is not the reason that Arkansas lost this game. But let's go ahead and just dive into the game itself, because I think what would be frustrating to me if I was an Arkansas fan is pretty straightforward. It is the fact that basically everything that had gone wrong through 3 games in league play actually was not really an issue on Tuesday night in Baton Rouge. So what we know about Arkansas coming into this game, they have not been a great 3-point shooting team. 9 of 20 from 3 on Tuesday night, so you can't blame the 3-point shooting. They were 9 of 20 overall. I think rebounding is increasingly becoming an issue. It feels like outside of Jonas Adu, guys just are not grabbing loose balls. Maybe that's a hustle play and effort. Well, guess what? They were at -2 in rebounding. They didn't get blown off the boards. It wasn't, they didn't, get out rebounded by 15 or 18 on the night. And so that has to be the most frustrating part. It's not just that you lost. It's that the reasons you have been losing weren't an issue. You shot the ball well. You rebounded well. By the way, we talked about it after the Florida game. You missed a million free throws against Florida, and if you make most of them, you win. Well, they were 11 of 13 from the free throw line. So you just sit there, and it just gets more frustrating. LSU had more turnovers. But at the end of the day, what ended up happening? In big moments when you needed stops, you just couldn't get them. It wasn't just that Cam Carter had 27 points. It was that it just felt like you would get you. First of all, they were up big. They were up what Arkansas fans, correct me, was it 28-16 in the first half? And you cannot get stops when you need it. You cannot stop the bleeding. And you are now 0-4 in SEC play. And what I'll say is a couple things about this game. First off, it's just becoming increasingly harder to see the darkness, to see through the darkness to the light, because I have always been somebody that has said, look, Cal hasn't always been great in January, but historically his teams have played well in February and early March, maybe not the SEC tournament, certainly not the NCAA tournament, but I go back to what I've said all along. Last year, they went 7-1 in their last 8 regular season games. That was included a win at Tennessee, included a win at Auburn, included a win over Alabama. But the problem becomes you're digging yourself a hole so deep that you could go 7-1 over the final 8. But if you're 0-8 to start, it's like it doesn't really matter. And so as you can see on the screen, they're 0-4 in league play, and they're just starting to dig themselves a hole that I don't think you can get out of. And I think the biggest concern for me is that if you can't beat LSU on the road, and it's no disrespect to LSU, I love Matt McMahon, had him on the show, I've said it a million times, but LSU probably is up there with maybe South Carolina as the least talented team in the SEC. And so if you can't beat LSU on the road, I just don't know what excitement you have to believe that you can go on a run. And this has been an issue that we've talked about with SEC basketball since before the season, and certainly once we realized how good this league was. I've told this story before, but I remember talking to a Big 12 coach about 3 years ago. They were okay during the regular season and got hot in the NCAA tournament. And what he told, I remember asking him, I said, so when did you get a feel that, maybe things would turn once you got to March? He said, Aaron, I always knew we had a good team. Our league was just so tough that I knew there was never going to be a moment where, even when we're playing well, you're just never in the Big 12 at the time going to win 5 of 6, 6 of 8, 8 of 9. It's just not going to happen. And that's where we're at in the SEC this year. We're going to get to some of the other results from Tuesday night. But Florida looked unbeatable there for a week. All of a sudden, they lose to Missouri. Alabama looked unbeatable for a week. They lose to Ole Miss. And so the concern is, even if you start to play better, there's no stretch on the schedule that you sit there and say, oh my goodness, if we can just get here with this record, we could rip off 5 of 6. We can rip off 4 or 5. Now, I will say the next couple are really important for Arkansas. And listen, I know every game feels important for Arkansas at this point, and they are. But you have at Missouri. Missouri's a really good team. Missouri is, listen, I had them in number 7, number 8 in my SEC power poll the other day. They're not unbeatable, though. They kind of weirdly match up well with Arkansas. They don't have a ton of size. I think Arkansas is going to struggle with the bigger teams in the SEC, the Alabamas, the Auburns, etc. So that is a winnable game, but you got to win it. Obviously, beyond that, Georgia and Oklahoma at home before you go to play at Kentucky. So all of these games are winnable, but at some point you got to actually do it. And so if you're an Arkansas fan, I understand your frustration. You should be frustrated. And I do think this is officially time to hit the panic button. Now, big picture with Calipari, listen, I'll be honest. I've been a defender. It is very hard to defend. I don't know that today is the day that we just throw all the dirt on the grave. There are still, 14 SEC games left. And I do think it is frustrating for me, though, to watch, because I know a lot of people will say, oh, Torres, and we haven't even gotten to the comments yet. But, I know people are going to be like, Torres, oh, my goodness, you always defend Cal. No, I'm not defending Cal. This is unacceptable, and I think it's especially unacceptable given a couple circumstances. One, we know this is an NIL world, and we know that Arkansas is taking care of their players as much as anybody, okay? I think beyond just the NIL stuff, I think if this was even 2 or 3 years ago, you could kind of argue, well, it's a first year, and it's a new this, and it's a new that. Well, here's the bottom line. 3 of these guys played for Cal last year. By the way, they're probably the 2 most consistent players on the team, DJ Wagner and Adu Thiero. They played for him last year. And so you can't sit there and say, well, he needs more time, and he needs this, and he needs that. Listen, everybody that is a new coach in college basketball now deals with complete roster overhaul. You can't blame, well, they have no players from last year except for Trevin Brazil, when Kentucky literally has no players and they're a top 10 team that picked up their 5th win against a top 15 opponent on Tuesday night. Louisville, by the way, is playing unbelievable, 13-5. They've won 8 straight games. They have a completely new roster with a completely new coaching staff. USC with Eric Musselman feels like they're starting to figure it out. 2nd straight nice win. They beat Illinois the other day, and they beat Iowa on Tuesday night. And so, look, I could go on. And I do think at some point there is the big picture Calipari conversation. Where are we with him? Is he enjoying this? Does he want to do this anymore? I'm not ready to get there yet because there's still so much more season to be had. But at some point, you have to break through. At some point, you have to get a win of note, especially at league play. I don't think this is the worst team in the SEC, but right now they are not playing like anything other than that. So it's a fascinating time. It's certainly a frustrating time for Arkansas fans. And this was the first time that I really sit there and say, okay, you now need to worry quite a bit. I saw John Rothstein actually tweet this, like, we're not quite in danger zone, like 5-alarm fire, but we're pretty darn close. And I think that there is something to that because, again, 0-3 is one thing, but 0-4 at LSU, that's just a game that you've got to win. So I think if you're looking for any sort of silver lining, it's that you finally shot the ball well, you finally rebounded pretty well, but you got to get stops when it matters. You got to get stops and scores when it matters. You got to get stops and big rebounds when it matters, and they just aren't doing it right now. And I could sit here and sugarcoat it and say, well, this, that, the other thing. The only positive is, by the way, LSU still is a quad 1 loss because obviously the window for road games gets much bigger in terms of who is considered a quad 1 opponent on the road. So if you're looking for any sort of silver lining, it is that you still have yet to take a loss outside of quad 1. But at some point, you got to start winning these games, and you certainly have to start winning games that matter. All right, so what we're going to do, take a quick break, come back. When we come back, I think it's bad for John Calipari. Woo, it is way worse for Mike Woodson. We're going to take a quick break, come back. Indiana gets smoked at Illinois. We got to talk about, or at home, against Illinois. And we got to talk about Mike Woodson, his future, because it is disappearing. It is slipping through his fingertips really quick. Quick break, talk Indiana. Then we'll talk some of the rest of Tuesday night. Be right back. All right, we're going to get back to the show in a minute. But before we do, many of you ask me all the time, Torres, what can I do to help support the show? You give me hours and hours and hours of content every single week. What can I do to help you? Well, I'll tell you what, do me a quick favor. Check out the Aaron Torres Media merchandise store for all of your team-specific shirts, hats, and more, all available at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. A lot of you wondering, Torres, what can I get in that merch store? Well, first of all, we got our brand new Hope and Pope Kentucky basketball t-shirts. That's right. Mark Pope has arrived. He is here to save the day. Get your Hope and Pope t-shirts there. Also, Arkansas fans, the Big Pig Invasion is here. You can get your tees there. Basketball School Alabama shirts. Mora Hurley 2024 UConn shirts for your tailgates at Rentschler Field, your games at the XL Center or Gamble. And oh, by the way, your Mike Woodson gear for Indiana. If you love football, we got you covered too. We got more Dion shirts and hats than we even know what to do with. The freeze warning has hit the plains. Auburn fans, grab your freeze warning tees now. And of course, our new era, new rules shirt applies to Nebraska football and its incredible fan base. We have more coming for the fall, plenty in stock right now. So make sure to check out the Aaron Torres Media merch store at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. And you can always hit me up with any questions. Aaron Torres Podcast. All right, everybody. All right, back. Good to be back. So want to go ahead and get to one comment from the comment section. Nobody says NIL money won't buy happiness, but it can pay for therapy. Well, I'll tell you what, nobody, you are a great producer, along with producer Matt. No disrespect, producer Matt, but nobody leads me perfectly from the conversation about Arkansas, a lot of NIL money, not a lot of wins, to a conversation about the Indiana Hoosiers who hosted the Illinois Fighting Illini on Tuesday night. And it did not go well. So I'll be honest. First of all, of every game on Tuesday night, I think this was the one that I was the most excited about going into the night. By the way, total side tangent. Hate that the Big Ten has decided to put their biggest games in the middle of the week on Peacock, okay? I'm sorry. It's hard. I have cable. I want to flip from ESPN to ESPN2 to FS1 to CBS Sports Network. Can we put it on regular TV? Can we put it on regular? All I want to do is watch Illinois, Indiana. All I want to do is watch Umar Ballo give 5% effort on a Tuesday night. Is that too much to ask? Anyway, all right. Let's go ahead and dive into this game. But I was excited, and I'll tell you why. One, I believe Illinois, as I said on Friday's show, I think they have as much upside as pretty much anybody in all of college basketball, okay? Now, I know people are going to say, oh, they lost on Saturday. Well, they lost on Saturday because they were without a lottery pick, okay? How good is Duke without Cooper Flagg? That's the equivalent of Illinois not having Kasper Siakishonis, okay? But Illinois, they get Kasper Siakishonis back, their lottery pick point guard, and they were going to Indiana. And I'll say this for Indiana. Coming into Tuesday night, they had an interesting resume because they were 13-4 overall. No really great wins, but for the most part, they were kind of taking care of business at home, right? When they lose, it's sometimes an embarrassing fashion. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But at least at home, they were protecting their home court. They lost by 25 on Saturday night, but that was at Iowa. So you think they're going to come home. They're going to protect their home court. They're going to be much better. Yeah, that did not happen because how about this? Indiana loses to Illinois. Final score 94-69. 94-69. It was Indiana's biggest home loss in program history. They gave up 60 points in the first half, trailed by 28 at halftime. And as the game went final, you could hear this at Assembly Hall. That was the Indiana student section screaming, chanting, clapping, fire Woodson. Yeah, fire Mike Woodson. So let's go ahead and dive into the state of Indiana because to me, this felt like the unofficial end of an era at Indiana. By the way, very quickly before we even get to Indiana, I think part of this is just Illinois is really freaking good. I said it the other day. I believe, as I just said, that they might have the highest upside of anyone in college basketball. By the way, I tweeted that out on Tuesday night. People got mad at me. I said, Auburn is deserving to be the best team in college hoops, but you're going to have a hard time convincing me that anyone is playing better than Illinois right now. Well, of course, when I tweeted that, a bunch of casuals who don't watch college basketball said, Torres, they lost on Sunday. Well, guess what? Their starting point guard was out, who's a lottery pick. Last 3 games with Kasper Siakishonis in. At Oregon, a top 10 team at the time, they win by 32 points, beat Washington by 4 on the road, and then they did beat Penn State by 39 before that loss. So don't tell me that they're not playing well, but that's not what this is about. Today, people, it is about Indiana, and it is about the future of Mike Woodson. And it's kind of funny. Listen, I think most people know the history here. I was not a big fan of Mike Woodson. Ironically, I think there's a tweet of me saying, I guess Indiana's a football school now. Maybe a little bit of a premonition by Torres. I mean, who knew that I was right? But shout out Kurt Signetti, by the way. But at the same time, look, when I look at this situation, a couple things stand out because people say, oh, it's too early to judge Mike Woodson. Don't tell Indiana fans that because they're ready to move on, okay? And for people who don't know his track record, he's been there for 4 years. This is year 4. Year 1, 21-14. Made the NCAA tournament in the first 4. So in other words, they had to play that Tuesday night, Wednesday night game. They do win a game, get into the main bracket, lose. Second year, they go 23-12 and go to the NCAA tournament, win a game, and then lose in the second round. In defense of Mike Woodson, they end up losing to Miami. Miami makes the Final Four. So first of all, 2 pretty uninspired years to start. Last year, they go 19-14, and there was already talk about, like, are we sure we should bring back Mike Woodson this season, the 24-25 season, or should we move on? Especially because, of course, Dusty May was available, the former Indiana student manager who's an Indiana graduate. They decide to give Mike Woodson another year, and beyond that, they didn't just give him another year. The issue is they gave him another year and very publicly a lot of NIL money, okay? And so when you look at this team, it's not just that they're not terrible, okay? But at the same time, elevated expectations are across the board. And so when you give millions of dollars in NIL, when it's very public that you have one of the biggest NIL budgets in all of college basketball, yeah, you're expected to win. Well, there's a few issues with that. One, when you lose, again, 13-5 isn't terrible. The issue is when you lose, it is often in like the most embarrassing fashion possible, okay? You go back to Indiana when they played in the Bahamas. They got embarrassed in a couple games. They lost by 28 to Louisville. Not great. They lost by 23 to Gonzaga. You could sit there and say 26 to Gonzaga, excuse me. Oh, Gonzaga's good. Well, you should have lost by 28 to Louisville in Pat Kelsey's first month as Louisville head coach. You lose to Nebraska on the road. I think the score was not reflective of how close that game was. But then, as I said, a 25-point road loss to Iowa, a 25-point home loss, to Illinois as well. I think the other issue, it ain't going to get any easier from here. 2 games against Purdue still on the schedule. Purdue, we could, joke, but they're pretty good. Michigan at home. I think that's going to be a tough one in early February. Dusty May coming home with maybe the best team in the Big Ten. Michigan State all of a sudden looks like a contender in the Big Ten. Ohio State, they have to play twice. Ohio State's not playing well, but they're a tough team that's not going to roll over. And so that's part of the issue is they're 13-5 and they still feel like they have 5, 6, 7 losses on the schedule, no great wins. But here's the really big picture issue with Indiana right now. It's not just that you're losing. It's not just that you're getting embarrassed often. It's that you're getting embarrassed off the court often, okay? So a couple things here. One, there had been discipline issues in the program previously. Some of it got reported, some of it didn't. I think most Indiana fans know what I'm talking about. But then this year, you got a bunch of highly paid kids that are, and by the way, we got to remember too, Indiana is the program of Bob Knight, the program of no nonsense, the program of no BS. Well, I bring it up because you have a bunch of high profile kids that are getting paid a lot of money and they're kind of doing dumb stuff, right? Umar Ballo, we all saw their starting center who's supposedly getting right around 7 figures as a college basketball player. He showed up at a bar like at midnight the night before a game and gets suspended the next game and nobody will talk about it. That's not great. That is embarrassing for the program. By the way, producer Matt, I wish I had you pull the picture. It's kind of funny. Umar Ballo, 7'2" guy just standing in the background trying to hide. Like, okay, you're 7'2", bro. It's not going to work. So your star player or your key player shows up to the bar the night before a big game. By the way, Umar Ballo got ejected on Tuesday night. You had players coming out and saying, if you don't want to support us, then whatever, we don't want you when we win. And so it's not just that you're losing on the court. It's that you are embarrassing the university off the court as well. And that's where I go to. I do kind of think that this is the beginning of the end for Mike Woodson. Excuse me. Bottom line is, listen, program is not having success on the court. They're embarrassing off the court. And I do think you kind of look at him, you kind of look at some of his responses. He looks like he's already worn down from the job. Now, this was my issue when he got hired 4 years ago, is a guy that's 63, 64, going to have the energy in this new NIL world. But I look at the state of things. He looks beat down. They've spent a lot of money in NIL. Obviously, they're going to be hesitant to spend money again this offseason to support this program. And so even if they make the tournament, I wonder if he's gone. And then certainly if they miss the tournament, there's no doubt that he's gone. Lastly, I'll just say before we get to some of the other games from Tuesday night, I think it's probably a little too early to start talking about next head coach, but I think that is one of the frustrating things about this situation. Dusty May was there for the taking a year ago. Florida Atlantic coach, went to a Final Four, was an Indiana alum, was a student manager under Bobby Knight. He was there. He was going somewhere after last year. Now, there's no guarantee it would have been Indiana, but it probably would have been hard to turn down. He's now at Michigan. He is going to be a thorn in your side for the next 20 years. But now that he's not available, it's like, who's the great candidate? I saw Jeff Goodman kind of reference in passing, call Scott Drew. It's like, if Scott Drew turned down Louisville and Kentucky in the same offseason, I don't think he's leaving. I know he's from Indiana. His dad coached at Valpo. Maybe it's a little bit different. I don't know. I mean, he just turned down Kentucky and Louisville. I don't know. Is Indiana gonna move the needle for him? By the way, worth noting, his team's not playing that well either right now. I saw some Indiana fans clamoring for TJ Otzelberger, the Iowa State coach. Great coach. Number 2 team in the country right now. Has that toughness and ethos that you want. Here's the problem. He's got like a $15, $16, $17 million buyout. So I don't think he's going anywhere. You're going to have to spend all your money, all your NIL money on just buying out Iowa State's coach. I don't think that's going to happen. Do you go with a young guy like Ben McCollum, who's kind of on the way up, dominating at Drake this year? I don't know. But I think on top of everything, that's the frustrating part, is that you had Dusty May, you didn't get him, and now there's no great candidate. All right, quickly, let's whip around the rest of college hoops. We will put we will wrap the show, talking a little bit about that Kentucky-Texas A&M game. We'll take some of your questions and comments in the comment section, and should mention, by the way, it should be pinned to the top of the YouTube comments. But we are, we are helping Pasadena Humane Society with a fundraiser, raising money for animals that have been displaced by the fire. If you can help, we would appreciate it. Before we move on, should shout out our partners, should shout out our friends. We got to shout out Collie Puffs and ColliePuffs.com. Okay, so it's the new year. I've told you about Collie Puffs, okay? It's the new year. You're trying to eat healthy. You're trying to be responsible. You're trying to do what's right. You're trying not to put bad things into your body. I was doing so good in dry January until Tuesday night when I had 8 hours of college hoops to watch. May have had a sip or two of something I shouldn't have. But same time, you want to eat healthy. It's 2025. That is where Collie Puffs and ColliePuffs.com come in. These are your new age healthy snack foods. Okay. First of all, love the story with Collie Puffs. We've told you it before, but Joey, friend of, not, he's become a friend, but somebody I've gotten to know. Young guy, young kids. He's a football fan. He was actually at that Rams playoff game in Arizona the other day. So I bring it up because he's sitting on the couch watching his team, and he's like, I need to find something healthy to eat, but something that's also delicious. I need to find something healthy to eat, but also something that my kids want. Well, that, my friends, is where he came up with Collie Puffs. These are delicious. They're the alternative to the crap in your grocery aisle. Baked, not fried, avocado oil, no grease, healthy ingredients. But the best part is, as I've told you, they taste delicious. So at this point, you don't need Torres to tell you any more about Collie Puffs. You need to try them for yourself. Go ahead, visit ColliePuffs.com. That's CAULIPUFFS.com. Or you can also get them on Amazon. So you're on Amazon, you're searching for whatever, you're searching for your Fire Mike Woodson tea, whatever you're searching for. You can search for it, throw some Collie Puffs in your cart, try them out. You will enjoy them. Again, Collie Puffs, delicious, healthy, alternative snack food in your grocery aisle. Tell them Torres sent you. Visit ColliePuffs.com, or you can also try them out via Amazon. With that said, what I want to do is quickly kind of rip through a couple other topics from throughout the evening in college hoops. First one, a pair of upsets in the SEC. And to me, Florida losing to Missouri, Alabama losing to Ole Miss. That to me is much more about the fact that the SEC is just so deep, so talented, so good. And I think, like I said a minute ago with the Arkansas stuff, I think it's going to be hard even for good teams to go on 5-game winning streaks, to win 6 out of 7. It's just tough in this league. The Missouri-Florida game, I think to me was probably a little bit more surprising. Florida coming off a dominant win against Tennessee a week ago. They go to Bud Walton and get the win. They're playing really well. Well, they got blitzed by Dennis Gates' team. By the way, it was Dennis Gates' birthday on Tuesday night. I saw that he said in the locker room, hey, guys, great this, great that. Oh, by the way, thanks for giving me a great birthday present. So Missouri gets the win. They were up 50-34 at halftime. I just thought it was a sloppy, opening performance by Florida. And I don't want to disregard what Missouri did to get this win, but Florida was sloppy from the beginning, a lot of turnovers. Todd Golden, who I respect the way he coaches, he trusts the analytics, kept one of his players in who picked up a 4th foul. Thomas Hawk picked up a 4th foul in the first half of the game. And so it was just kind of a weird game where Florida was kind of behind the whole time and they were playing catch up. They couldn't do enough to get the win. I'm telling you, people, Missouri is really good. They play fast. They shoot a lot of threes. I really like their guards. Tamar Bates, Mark Mitchell played pretty well the other night. He's more of a wing, the Duke transfer. But like I said, I thought they were the most underappreciated, underdiscussed team. We did an SEC basketball power ranking on Monday on the YouTube channel. And I said, I think they're the most underappreciated, underdiscussed team in college basketball. And I think they proved it on Tuesday night. They get the win at Florida. The other big upset in the SEC, let's give credit where it's due. Chris Beard, another team that we did talk about the other night. Chris Beard and Ole Miss, they go to Alabama and they get the upset win at Alabama. How about this? Ole Miss, hotty toddy, gosh almighty. Ole Miss, the only undefeated team outside of Auburn remaining in the SEC at 15-2 overall, 4-0 in the conference. Listen, in terms of how this game happened, why it happened, what happened, this is what stands out. I said it in the SEC Power Rankings show on Monday night. Ole Miss last year was good, but Chris Beard's best teams, you want to know what the secret sauce has actually been? It's been the defense, and his defensive guru has been Mark Adams. Mark Adams, if you remember, when Chris Beard left Texas Tech, Mark Adams replaced him at Texas Tech. And so his 1 year at Texas and then his first year at Ole Miss, and obviously there was the high-profile firing in between, he didn't have Mark Adams. And I thought last year it just felt like they couldn't get stops at crucial times. Well, Mark Adams gets fired at Texas Tech. Chris Beard quietly brings him with him to Ole Miss. And basically, Ole Miss is one of the great defensive teams in college basketball. I said it the other day, but coming into this game, top 40 in field goal percentage defense, 3-point defense, and points allowed. And you watched it in this Alabama game where Alabama couldn't get anything going. This was Alabama by far their worst offensive performance of the season. How about this? 21 turnovers for Alabama. Some of that's on Alabama. A lot of that is on Ole Miss, though. And Ole Miss obviously takes care of business. They also, and this is an important stat, hold Alabama to 5 of 20 shooting from three. So listen, ain't a math major, ain't an analytics guy, but when you turn the ball over 21 times and you shoot 25% from three, you're not going to win a lot of games. But also a lot of that has to do with Chris Beard, with this defense, with Ole Miss, and with what they did. So I want to give Ole Miss credit. Listen, I think, let me say this. Considering what Auburn did, it feels hard for me to say that anyone other than Auburn should be the favorite in the SEC. But I think I had Ole Miss at number 6 in my SEC power rankings. That's a really good team. They already have a couple of really impressive wins at Alabama, at Arkansas. Georgia has not lost a game to this point outside of their game against Ole Miss. And so you look at this team, they might be, I think it's a little early to call them an SEC title. Listen, I think they're a contender. I still think Auburn's the runaway favorite. Tennessee's really good. Kentucky's really good. But Alabama's really good too. Ole Miss, though, has to be considered the biggest surprise in the league. Auburn and Ole Miss, the only 4-0 teams. 2 upsets in the SEC. Really quickly want to shoot out to the Big 12. I just got to give credit to a team that I had kind of buried about 5 or 6 weeks ago. That's the Arizona Wildcats. Arizona, I felt like this was the first kind of really high-profile home Big 12 game. They opened with TCU a few weeks ago, but they played Baylor, 11 p.m. Eastern, ESPN, high-profile game, and they blitzed the Baylor Bears. Final score in this one, 81-70. That's not reflective of what this game was like. Arizona was up 23 points at the half. Before they kind of let their foot off the gas, they end up winning 81-70. In terms of this game, we might have talked about it on a previous show. Henry Visar, who was their backup big, he's playing like all Big 12 first team kind of guy. 19 points in this game. It was interesting because even on the broadcast, they acknowledged Arizona had a center by the name of Montes Krivas. I'm sorry. I'm not great with the first name. Last name Krivas. Some people were calling him a lottery pick. I didn't really see that necessarily, but I bring it up because very high profile. Tommy Lloyd said he thought that Krivas was their most important player. He gets hurt, and it has opened the door for Henry Visar, who has been phenomenal the last couple games. In this game, how about this for a stat line? 19 points on 9 of 11 shooting, 7 boards, 2 steals, 2 blocks. So if you had Henry Visar in your fantasy college basketball league, congratulations. But I look at Arizona, to me, this is a dangerous team in the Big 12. And I just got to give credit because they're a team that I had given up on at one point. What were they? 6-5, Arizona fans, 5-5. Well, they've now quietly won 7 games in a row, 5-0 alone atop the Big 12 standings. Now, again, Toughest part of their schedule is still ahead. 2 games against Iowa State, return trip to Baylor, at BYU, at Kansas State, who I know Kansas State isn't playing well, but that's a tough place to play. I just bring it up because Arizona right now is looking like the team that we all had as a preseason top 10 team. Remember, they were number 9, I think, in the preseason AP poll. Give them credit there. Really quickly, do want to wrap with 2 other games, back to the SEC, and then we will take some of your questions. The first one, let's go ahead and give credit where it's due. The Auburn Tigers are a freaking wagon. By the way, producer Matt is helping me with the Torres on Auburn account, so if you're an Auburn fan, make sure you're following. They're a wagon. That's all there is to say, is that you lose Johni Broome, who in my opinion should still be the national player of the year. Now listen, if Cooper Flagg keeps balling out, he's going to surpass him. That's fine. But you lose maybe the national player of the year. You play a Mississippi State team ranked in the top 15 and you destroy them. Final score 88-66. They were up 19 at the half. I'll be honest. Don't tell anybody. I didn't really watch much of this game because I was kind of locked in on Kentucky, Texas A&M, Indiana, Illinois, Auburn, or Alabama, and Ole Miss. I flip on this game. Auburn's up by like 20. I'm like, they're awesome. And so the one thing I will say about Auburn, I told you this on Sunday's show. After Johni Broome goes down with injury, I talked to somebody in the program. They told me point blank. They said, look, it sucks. We feel awful for Johni. We feel awful for the big man. He's a great kid. He's great this, great that. He said, but we have a next man up mentality. Remember, Auburn has something like 8 or 9 scholarship seniors on their roster. In other words, they have a lot of guys who've seen a lot of stuff in college basketball, and they're not just going to roll over because they lost an All-American, and that is, again, no disrespect intended for Johni Broome. And so they take care of business. The other thing you got to remember with Auburn is they have a 5th-year senior backup center in Dylan Cardwell that would start for 99% of teams. So I could go on, but Auburn, man, they are a freaking wagon. They deserve all the credit in the world. They get the win in this one. Final score 88-66 at Georgia, and then a full week off. And so I don't think Auburn's going to rush back Johni Broome, but I don't think they have to rush him back either, because if they can get through Georgia, imagine that. Imagine if they could get through Georgia at 17-1, 5-0 in the SEC, 2.5 games without Johni Broome. Then they get a week off before they do have Tennessee at home. All right. Really quickly, there is one more game that I do want to get to before we wrap the show. I do want to talk about another top 15 matchup at Rupp Arena. Feels like every time that Kentucky takes to court, they are playing a top 15 team. In the case of Tuesday night, it was the Texas A&M Aggies, and Kentucky, for the 5th time this year, has beaten a team ranked in the top 15. They've beaten Duke on a neutral. They've beaten Gonzaga on a neutral. They beat Florida at Rupp. They beat Mississippi State on Saturday night. Well, they get Texas A&M at home, and they beat them. Final score 81-69. And when I look at this game, first of all, I want to get to some Buzz Williams comments later on here in just a moment. But before we get there, I want to say this. Can I say that this is Kentucky's best win of the season? I cannot, okay? Because Duke is awesome. Duke's going to be a 1 seed. Gonzaga's great. That game was in Seattle. You win at Mississippi State. Florida, I still think is awesome, even though they lost. I can't say this is the best game, the best win. It might be the most impressive, though, and let me explain why. Because through early in the season, Kentucky has really been able to win one way. And Kentucky fans, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You got to score, and hope. All you got to do is be 1 point better than the opposition. And if you can do that, you get the win. And you look at Kentucky's big wins early in the season. 77-72 at Duke, okay. But then you have the 90-89 win over Gonzaga in overtime, the 93-85 win over Louisville, the 106-100 win over Florida, and the 95-90 win over Mississippi State. Outside of the Duke game, what is the one common denominator? You had to score a bunch of points, you had to shoot really well, or you were not going to win based on defense and based on, let's be honest, toughness, right? That has been a prevailing comment and a prevailing commentary about this Kentucky basketball team. It is this team, quote, tough enough to beat the great teams in the country? Well, one, I think the toughness is relative, but the one thing that has been clear, and we've talked about it, there's been a lot of up and down games from a lot of different players. And then also Could you win games based on defense? Could you win games based solely on that toughness? And I think they kind of did that on Tuesday night. Texas A&M, and they talked about it during the broadcast. I'm sorry, Tuesday was kind of crazy for me, but I think Jimmy Dykes was on the broadcast. If he wasn't, I apologize. Don't yell at me. But I believe it was Jimmy Dykes that said it like 2 or 3 times. Like, listen, Texas A&M is going to drag you in the mud, and they're going to make you play in the mud. And are you going to be able to handle it? And Kentucky handled it. And so what should be refreshing if you're a Kentucky fan is a couple of things. One, you won a game where, again, you were kind of dragged into the mud, where a game where you scored in the low 80s and a lot of those points came late. It was 35-32 at halftime, okay? You played a game, by the way, where you didn't shoot great from the three-point line. I mean, you look at some of these Kentucky wins. Look at the win over Florida a few weeks ago as an example. In that win over Florida as a team, Kentucky shot 14 of 29 from three, 48%, okay? Well, you go to Tuesday night against Texas A&M. Texas A&M actually did a pretty good job of limiting the three-point shots. 9 of 27 Kentucky shot, that's 33%. So Kentucky did not shoot great. They found a way to win against a tough physical team. They out-rebounded them in a plus 10 manner. So again, if you're arguing Kentucky ain't tough enough, well, guess what? They were plus 10 on the boards against Texas A&M, a team that thrives on the boards. And I think it's very clear to me that Mark Pope kind of emphasized, hey, if we're not going to crash the glass, we're not winning this game. Beyond that, there's something else that I want to talk about, really 2 things. One, Jackson Robinson's turning into a star in front of our eyes. Okay, by the way, as producer Matt just reminded me, make sure you're following our Torres on UK account, Torres on UK, for all your late-breaking Kentucky news, okay? But to keep the conversation going, I think Jackson Robinson is turning into a star in front of our eyes. In this game, remember, he had 27 against Mississippi State the other night. He has 22 in this game, 8 rebounds, and I think most importantly, as I said, while much of the team struggled, Jackson Robinson against his former team, 5 of 13 from 3. Yeah, he was chirping at that Texas A&M bench. Yeah, Buzz Williams wanted a technical foul called. No, he did not get it. So Jackson Robinson, man, oh man, he's kind of letting it hang right now, if you know what I mean. And he's turning into the star that Kentucky needs, because I will say, I do believe, and I've said this, I think Lamont Butler has been pretty consistent. Otega Owe has scored a lot, but it's sometimes been up and down. When he struggled, he's put up points, but 4 of 13 from the field, 3 of 13 from the field, whatever. But at the same time, what I would also add is that you look at Kentucky, they need that go-to guy every night. And it doesn't have to be 27, doesn't even have to be 22. But can Jackson Robinson consistently get them 16 to 17 to 18 a night? If they can, it's a total game changer. Lastly, before we get to some of your questions, saw a great quote after the game from Buzz Williams talking about this Kentucky team. He said, quote, "They're good enough to win the national championship. They play with great spirit. Their coach has a phenomenal spirit. How he leads is the appropriate way in 2025. Listen, I'll leave that last quote, how he leads in 2025. Buzz Williams is a big leadership guy. I don't know how many people know this, but he takes leadership seminars. I've been told when he retires from coaching, he wants to be like a life coach. But so leading to him is a very important element. But I only say that to say, I want to talk for half a second about his comments. Kentucky is good enough to win a national championship. Listen, first of all, I think they are. I mean, listen, just think about it. I mentioned it. 5 wins against top 15 teams. Those are the teams that you're going to have to beat in the Sweet 16, the Elite 8 in a Final Four game. You could beat Duke on a neutral in Atlanta at the Champions Classic. Then you could beat Duke in San Antonio. You could beat Duke in an Elite 8 game wherever the Elite 8 would be played. So if you beat Duke, you beat – and I think the cool thing about watching Kentucky is they're doing it against a lot of different teams. Florida, elite 3-point shooting team, elite offensive rebounding team. Texas A&M, much more defensive culture. Now, they're an offensive rebounding team as well, but they don't score a ton. But they dragged you in the mud. Florida dragged you into a high-scoring game, and you were able to respond in all manners. I think beyond that, and this is the important part as well, is that you have to be able to continue to get better on defense. I think Tuesday night was a great, great, great first step if you are a Kentucky fan, because you were, again, able to win a game where their defense did a relatively good job of shutting you down, but your defense stepped up. think in some of the losses, most specifically Georgia last week, you really didn't do that. And so the fact that you were able to do it, I think it's a totally positive sign. And I think what Buzz Williams said is accurate. I think we're talking about a team that is good enough to win a national championship. Now, will they? Only one team can win it. But can they? Yeah, I'd put them in that class. I'd put them in the class with Auburn. I'd put them in the class with Duke. I'd put them in the class with Iowa State. Because, again, they're able to win in different ways. They're able to figure out ways to win in different manners. That's kind of the same thing. I think I just said the same thing. But you get the point. Kentucky with the very nice win over Texas A&M. Producer Matt, I got to run here in a minute. Do we have time for one or two questions? We got a great live audience today. I appreciate everybody who is tuning in here on a Wednesday morning. Maybe this is the path forward. Maybe rather than trying to record late Tuesday, we go early Wednesday. We'll continue the conversation. B999 says, Cal to Indiana, Woodson to Arkansas. I don't think either fan base would be fired up about that. And here's the thing. I don't think Arkansas fans have completely given up on Cal. Indiana fans have given up on Woodson. This is year 4. I think Arkansas fans are starting to realize that there is a reason that Kentucky fans were willing to let John Calipari walk. And I would say from Calipari's perspective, at some point, man, you got to win a couple of these games. Like Torres, I guess Seth Greenberg is like the number 1 Calipari defender. And I feel like I'm number 2. But at some point, you got to win games that matter. The old John Calipari saying is, you don't have to win every. What's the saying about 3-point shooting? You don't have to make every shot, but you can't miss them all either. It's kind of the same with these big games, Cal. You don't have to win every single one of them. You can't lose every single one of them either. Any other quick questions before we get out of here? Interesting comment. I don't care what anyone says. Boogie is shooting us out of games 5 of 20 against Florida, 6 of 24 versus LSU, and is getting no one else involved. That's Boogie Flan from Arkansas. My only argument against that, Boogie Flan also went on like a personal 9-0 run late in the game that got you back in the game after that weird flagrant foul. So I think with a freshman lead guard, you got to take the good with the bad. Now, I think, transparently, I think that hurts him as like an NBA player. I don't know that like 6'2" guy that doesn't get others involved, like screams to me like future NBA superstar, but I don't think you can blame him because he's your most gifted offensive player. Now, would you like to see others involved? Absolutely. I think my bigger concern with Arkansas, it seems like Adu Theoro has regressed. And what I keep going back to, it's not just the 3-point shooting. It's that it's not just the 3-point shooting. It's that I really feel like they struggle to rebound. So when you are, and I looked it up, they're like 136th in the country in second chance points. So like very middle of the pack. Would love to, I'm going to do some research maybe later today. I would guess that's the bottom half, probably to the bottom third of the SEC in offensive rebounding and second chance points. When you're not a great shooting team, you have to be able to crash the glass. And right now they are 136th in second chance points. They're not getting a lot of offensive rebounds. Now they were good against LSU. And that's the frustrating part about the LSU loss is you're like, dude, everything that was going wrong, we fixed going into this game and we still didn't win. So I do understand the frustration from Arkansas fans. Really quickly, do we have one more good one before we get out of here? All right. Okay, Luke, we had this question the other day. Do you think the SEC is better or worse from top to bottom than the 2010-2011 Big East that got 11 teams in the dance? Is beating that record realistic for 2023? Listen, I'd have to really go back and look. UConn, look, this is how good that league was. UConn was they finished 9th in the league and won the national championship. That was the famous Kemba Walker 5 games in 5 days. They go to the Big East tournament as the 9 seed. They had to play on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. They beat Louisville for the Big East championship. And by the end of that Saturday, they were a completely different team. Jeremy Lamb was stepping up, Shabazz Napier. Anyway, this isn't a UConn history lesson, but they were 9th in that league during the regular season. So with the SEC, one, are those 11 teams attainable? Yeah. But some of these middle of the pack teams, and that's why, and this has happened in the Big Ten a few times in the past couple of years, is you come out of conference play thinking you're going to get 10, 11 teams. The key is you can't have the teams in the middle and the bottom lose to everybody. Like Arkansas a week ago was a tournament team. Well, now you're 0-4 in league play. Like I think Arkansas, if they just get to 7-11 in the SEC, they're going to be a tournament team because there's going to be enough wins. But to get to 7-11 means they got to go 7-7 over their final 14 games. Does anyone think they're going to do that right now? No. So are they going to get to the tournament at 6-12 in league play? Probably not. It's the same with Oklahoma. It's the same with Texas. Those are the teams, like those teams have to win enough games against the middle and the upper tier in the league to actually have a tournament resume. And that's where I have questions. Is Georgia another team that stands out? At some point, you're going to have to win the games against the really bad teams if you consider LSU, South Carolina to be the bad teams. But then also, you're going to have to pick off an Ole Miss here, an Alabama there, a Florida there. And if you can do that, then that's how you get 11 to 12 teams in. Right now, I would have said a week ago that I think that the SEC would get at least 11, maybe more. I do think with Arkansas starting 0-4 in SEC play, and Texas and Oklahoma are both 0-3. They play tonight. One of those teams is going to be 0-4. It's just hard for me to imagine two teams that start 0-4, both making the NCAA tournament. That's kind of the math that gets you to 12. So I don't know that they're going to break the record because, again, just the teams at the top are so good. I mean, we've seen Arkansas against Tennessee, Florida, and Ole Miss. Those are maybe 3 of the 4 or 5 best teams in the league. They're 0-3. You go 1-2, it's probably a completely different deal. All right, I'll tell you what. I do think I got to get out of here. David, thank you. David, and you know what? This is a perfect way to end the show. So David said this. We are Aaron Torres Media. I'm a little emotional, but I am proud of what we are doing. We are raising money. We are working with the Pasadena Humane Society here in Southern California. So if you missed it to lead the show, here's the bottom line is I live in Southern California. I live in LA. I am very grateful. I am fine. My family's fine. My loved ones are fine. My dog is fine, by the way. She's laying on the couch right now. But there's a lot of people and a lot of animals that have been displaced by this fire. And transparently, just be honest, the fire's 2-3 miles from where I live. I'm fine. I never even lost power. It's unbelievable by the grace of God. I'm not trying to make this about me. But what I am saying is I went down to the Humane Society on Monday morning, and they just need help. They need help. They have volunteers, but they need money. And really what the money is for medical care. Remember, a lot of these animals were exposed to smoke, were exposed to fire, were exposed to burns. And so we're raising money. If you can help, the link is pinned atop our YouTube chat. So you can just click that link. If you can give $5, if you can give $10, whatever. We will also make sure, by the way, that we have this link posted in the notes on the YouTube channel as well as the podcast, because at the end of the day, this matters and this is important. And I'll just wrap by saying, I just want to be clear. I understand money's tight. I'm not here to tell anyone ever how to spend their money. I know you got kids, you got grandkids, you got groceries, you got pets of your own. But if you can give $5, if you can give $10, that matters. That means something to the animals that need it. So again, Pasadena Humane Society, we are working with them. We appreciate their support. And yeah, links are everywhere. Links are on my Twitter bio. You can find out more information there. All right, I'll tell you what, I'm going to get out of here. Appreciate everybody's support. If you're not subscribed, please make sure to do so. Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Music, wherever you listen to podcasts, make sure that you are subscribed. Make sure to rate and review the show. Go ahead, give us a quick 5 stars. By the way, B99 says, best basketball show. There are bigger shows, but not better. Hit that like button. Hit that subscribe. I'll be real. You're right. By the way, I don't think there's very many that are bigger because we're about to hit 50K and we ain't slowing down. So appreciate everybody's support. We will be back tomorrow. I like this early window. I don't think we can go quite this early tomorrow, but I appreciate you. We will be back tomorrow to recap tonight's games. By the way, I think we'll do a mailbag tomorrow. I got a couple good questions. Drop your mailbag questions, Aaron Torres podcast questions at gmail.com. Otherwise, we will get to them with the show tomorrow. Appreciate everybody.